Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the colleagues, fellow colleagues here, and to the participants. Now it becomes very difficult, when you are listed as a speaker down the line, because already people have spoken about the solutions. They have also given raised the problems, of course, given the solutions. Now, so how do I justify my presence here? So I always struggle, whenever I am listed down the line to speak. But let's try to justify that. Uh, First of all, I would just like to emphasize that, of course, there is a wide array of nature-based solutions that are available. What we are working on is actually looking at how the reuse of treated wastewater, or let's say used water, can be mainstreamed. And the whole thing is that this itself is a nature-based solution, because once we are talking about treatment, so for the treatment also you have different technologies, but of course uh, 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 a kind of a regular nature-based solutions like constructed wetlands, they might not be feasible under all the settings. They need area, they need land, and unfortunately our densely populated urban areas are unable to offer such kind of a settings. But having said that, even if we mainstream reuse of treated wastewater, it itself can generate a lot of potential environmental and social benefit that are important to consider, and it itself becomes a solution to the problem that we see. With this pretext, I would be presenting what we have been doing. Next slide, please. I won't be going in detail on the CEEW, but yes, we are a research policy think tank. We are working at almost 15 program areas. Sustainable water is one of the program areas that I lead. Next slide, please. The water program, as I said, circularity in wastewater management is one of the components, that we focus on. The other three are policy coherence for water, energy, food sectors. We also work on water accounts and how they can be used for river basin management. And one another area that we are started working on is the policy coherence, the capacity building for climate action. So these are the four areas that we focus on. Next slide, please. Now, this has already been highlighted by previous speakers. We are already in a stage where the water stress is increasing. And by 2025, you will see that only two or three river basins in India will qualify as, without having any water stress. Now, there are these standard definitions, which are used to qualify these river basins, and I won't be going in detail in them. But what I like to highlight here is that apart from the, various other options that we have to manage water across basin and make, let's say, a particular basin or a geographical unit water secure. Uh, Improving efficiency of water use. I think the previous speakers, Bhopal Singh ji and as well as Sinha Saab, highlighted this fact. Improving water use in various scales. It can be irrigation system, it can be urban system, it can be industries, and mainstreaming reuse of wastewater. I think these two are going to be a very important, kind of interventions if we really have to move and move towards providing more access to water and make our, different sectors water secure. Next slide, please. Just to highlight, if we just talk about the urban context, how much are these unaccounted for water? We keep on speaking about it. So you will see an entire range. But what is concerning is that our metro cities are also the one where these unaccounted for water losses are very high. So at one side, we take pride in the way we are developing our cities, but at the same time, we are also creating a lot of inefficiencies in the way we are managing our resources. Next slide, please. Now, if I solely talk about wastewater, and here the pitch is that, how this can be a resource for the future. So if you look at the pan-India level, about 72,000 million liters per day of wastewater is generated. We have a capacity to treat about 42%, but actual utilization, or let's say actual treatment, is about 28%. And there are several reasons for it. I won't go in detail, but for example, many a times there are maintenance issues. Many a times the technology is unable to take care of the effluent that you are getting. So though we design these systems to receive sewage, but most of the time what ends up is that a lot of industrial effluent also gets mixed, and it affects the efficiency of how the sewage treatment plant is working. Next slide, please. Now, we also kind of estimated that, given the current state of, let's say, progress that we are making, how much of wastewater will be generated and how much treatment capacity will be there. So on one side, I think kind of a good news is that yes, I mean, if we continue to strengthen the capacity as we are doing now, so almost about 80% of the sewage that would be generated in, let's say, 2050, we'd be able to take care of. Next slide, please. Now, what this treated wastewater can actually offer us? So, we made an inquiry, we undertook a research at the pan India level. So, what we came up, I mean, these are very interesting numbers. So, if you look, like, if we can just sell whatever available treated wastewater is with us, I mean, 28% actual treatment, even if we assume that, we can earn about 630 million Indian rupees. Now, by 2050, of course, it will increase. But the other aspect which should also be highlighted here, if that particular treated wastewater is specifically used for agriculture, at least in the urban areas, where a lot of these vegetables are already grown using untreated water coming from the urban settings, even if we can push or nudge that conversion, there is a potential of earning a revenue of 966 billion. So there are lot. I mean, this is a quite deep study, and I will be happy to share more on this later on. Uh, what is also interesting to know that by using treated wastewater in agriculture, we are also reducing the application of fertilizers, which also means less application or less requirement of water. And because this wastewater is supplied, the farmers will also depend less on the groundwater. So in many of the peri-urban, urban areas, it's actually the groundwater which is the main source of irrigation, and you can check this. So if we are able to provide this, that much amount of abstraction will reduce, and it will of course lead to that much amount of less emission of carbon. So we made certain estimates, and if you look at it will be about 103 million tons at the pan India level. Next slide, please. This is just a chart which shows which are those vegetables that can be grown. Next slide, please. Now, if I talk about how we utilize it, one is that there is enough potential. But what are those policy and governance mechanism available with us to make use of this? Now, in India, around 10 states, they already have a reuse policy. Maharashtra has recently drafted that policy, and because we got a chance to review the policy, so we know that it will be out soon. So in total, around 11 Indian states have the reuse policy. The focus, of course, is mainly making reuse for the non-potable purposes. And of course, there is also a link to the mandatory use in the thermal power plants. So this again, have a kind of a implication on the way we manage our resources, and how we are reducing dependence on fresh water. Next slide, please. But what is actually interesting is, I mean, we reviewed all these policies. Now, and there was a standard framework to review these policies. There are two, three things which I would like to highlight here. One is that not all policies actually they look reuse from the point of view of environmental benefit, or let's say environmental externalities, the positive externalities they can create. So for them, it is just about treatment, strengthening the treatment capacity, and then this much water is available. The other thing is, though the policy mentions that which are those areas where you can make use of this treated wastewater, but what is not actually specified is what are the quality criteria, what are the quality standards of the water which is treated, which can be used in different sectors. Uh, they talk about allocation to different sectors, but how that allocation will be governed? Will it be governed on the basis of the current water consumption? For example, if 80% of the water is taken away by agriculture, so we will be supplying 80% of this treated wastewater to agriculture. So all those, kind of let's say nuances are not there. One important aspect I would also like to highlight is that essentially there is not specific focus on the nature-based treatment solution, even for the smaller town which have land where such systems can actually come up. So because we are talking at the state level, I mean this is not we are talking about any city specific. So I think there is a scope to strengthen these policies. And one bright light here is that Government of India this year they have come up with a national level guidelines on how to draft the reuse policies, and this has already been launched in January this year. So I think most of the states have an opportunity, to revisit their policies, and those states which do not have policy, they should also be, looking forward to it. Next slide, please. And this will be, I think, the last slide. Yes. Uh, I think I have spoken a lot on all these things which are there as a recommendation. One actually point that I would want to highlight here from the technology point of view. Now, what happens is that, there is a lot of these technologies which have come up. Some says it's innovative one, some says that the economy is going to be very good, some say that, oh no, the energy use is less, some say that we can recover almost everything. Now the point is, those technologies, those solutions has worked under certain settings. Now there is no point getting a technology which has worked in Europe and kind of applies straight in India, because the kind of the pollutants that might be there in the sewage is different. The bacteria, the life of bacteria under certain weather conditions will be different. We have a kind of a very hot and arid climate, so some of the bacteria may not even survive, which are used in these aerobic and anaerobic processes. So I think there is a need to still do more kind of a R&D on this. There are many industries, there are many industrialists who are into developing a lot of membranes, to make treated wastewater as profound as possible. But I think there is still need to strengthen those ecosystems and see what innovations we can come out with. And the last thing, see, making reuse of treated wastewater, it's still a behavioral issue. Even when we talk about for the non-potable purposes, which means that irrigating your gardens, cleaning your cars, or using them in the spray guns. So this still remains as a behavioral issue, unless and until this becomes part of the main policy process when we go for the river basin planning. Until we actually think this as a resource, I think we are not gonna make much progress in it. And of course, changing behavior, having a good public outreach is another thing that needs to be done. With this, thank you so much. I hope I have utilized the time allocated to me. Thank you so much.